Okay, so they actually did it. If you haven't heard, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is getting a remake on the Switch next year. And I just have to say, this is the greatest day of my life. I get it now. A lot of people talk about these games from their childhood getting remade, and I'm sort of realizing what that feels like when it actually happens to you, because I don't think this has ever happened to me on this level. There are a lot of games that I have played as a kid and enjoyed, or even like more recently that I've played and enjoyed, that have gotten remakes or have come to the Switch or, like been updated in some way, shape, or form. But I've never felt this way about a remake. I don't think there's ever been another game for me like The Thousand Year Door that I've wanted this badly. I have so many good memories of playing this with my brother when I was younger. And just talking about it with him and whoever, really. If you were to ask me what game I would remake from the ground up, I would tell you Pitfall: The Lost Expedition. But if you ask me what Nintendo game I would remake from the ground up, it would be Paper Mario. I don't actually have the disc here. My brother gave it away to someone a few years back, so thank you for that. So it's just surreal to me seeing this game, of all games, completely remade from the ground up. The funny thing about it is it's like Nintendo waited until everyone least expected it to drop it on us. I actually mentioned to someone before the Direct that it feels like we should get a Paper Mario game next year, because almost without fail, every 4 years there is a new Paper Mario game. The only exception is Super Paper Mario. But the other thing is there's only ever been one Paper Mario game per system. And we still know nothing about the Switch 2 officially, so it's hard to imagine another Paper Mario game coming to the Switch when we already have one. But then again, a remake just felt like a pipe dream, like it was something they would never actually do, and if they did, they would probably just remake the original at first, and then maybe, hopefully, they would get around to the Thousand Year Door someday. And even if they did remake it, it would just be, they wouldn't put a whole lot of effort into it. As we now know, that did not happen. Takahashi knew he was about to cook. It feels like we are right in that sweet spot where it's been long enough after the first game that we're not talking about it anymore, but not long enough that people were starting to talk about the next game in the series. So in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense that Nintendo just decided to drop this on us now when everyone least expected it. Everyone had pretty much given up hope that it was ever going to happen. But yeah, I've thought about this a lot in the past day, and like what it's going to be like coming back to this game and really diving into it after forever. I've actually never beaten it. My brother has. I've gotten pretty close, but I've never actually gotten all the way there. So this will definitely be the time when I do that. Anyway, I just thought I would take this opportunity to talk about the remake for a little bit and do some analysis and maybe talk a little bit about how this might affect the future of the Paper Mario series and also Nintendo as a whole, because Nintendo doesn't often go this hard when it comes to like remakes, re-releases, that kind of thing. So I think it'll be interesting. Okay, so I think the first thing that I and a lot of other people noticed watching this for the first time was how faithful it looks to the original game. The newer games have gone for more of this papercraft style, but the Thousand Year Door in particular was more of a pop-up storybook style, which did look great on GameCube. I think Paper Mario games are usually some of the best looking games on their respective systems, but it was definitely a little more ambiguous at the time. There was a lot of discussion online about if they remake this game, would they take the papercraft route that they've taken with the newer games, or would they try and stick to the pop-up style? And clearly they have gone with the latter. I think it's actually crazy how different these styles really are when you look at all the little details and how well Nintendo can differentiate them. It's just a million little subtle differences, like the white outlines is a big point of discussion on the characters in the newer games versus putting all the individually articulating parts of a character on different layers. Like if you look at Peach here, you can see her arm is like a separate cutout from her shoulder, which is a separate cutout from her head, and even her hair is on a separate layer, and the earring even. Or using wire or cardboard as a structural element, versus that pop-up technique where the terrain interlocks with itself, so it looks 3D when it's open, but it also holds itself up. I think this shot right here is a great example of that. Like, you have the tree here, which is open, and you got that 3D look, but it's holding itself up at the same time. And then you have the same thing going on with the hills here. And even if you look at the terrain down below, you can see it has like that sort of cross pattern going on. And even the ground textures are different. The other games use this rough construction paper texture, but in the Thousand Year Door, the ground is glossy, like the pages of a storybook. And that's why you get all these reflections on the ground. It's all like, I think it really works. I think it's super cohesive, and it just goes to show that 1, Nintendo is really good at paying attention to detail, and 2, that sometimes less is more. I honestly think it's really hard to top this kind of thing in terms of realism. Like, obviously it's a lot easier to render realistic paper, right, than human skin or water caustics like you would see in like the newest Avatar movie. But you can get incredible looking results with more simple materials. It's the same reason I would say the Lego movie is actually the most realistic looking animated movie, because it's all plastic. It's a lot simpler to work with than some other materials, but they just got all those little details perfect. They just focused on making sure everything about that one thing was perfect. So you get all these like micro abrasions on the pieces, and you have these imperfections around the edges of like Emmett's eyes where they would have been printed on. And similarly in Paper Mario, you have all these little paper isms, you know? One thing I really like is how you can see like where the paper was cut out on each layer of a character. So you can see that sort of white accent on the top of Mario's hat here. And then when Koops hits the switch here, you can see that it crumples up like an accordion. I really like this detail here of the Game Boy on the wall. You can see they cut out little sections so they could fold it more cleanly. And they also did it here in Tech's room with these buttons on the walls here. One of my favorite details is how the scenery unfolds at the start of a battle, like a pop-up book. I could go on. Like, I love this stuff to death. I think it all looks really, really solid. But that's not all. There are a couple of other little details. All the music is redone. It all sounds really good. I can't wait to hear the rest of it. Also, all the characters talk like Banjo-Kazooie characters. You can hear their individual voices when they speak. Super Mario Broth on Twitter pointed out that this Toad is a brand new character. This Toad was not in the original game at all. So it'll be interesting to see what else they might add, if they'll add much more. I mean, there has to be some sort of reason for this Toad being here, right? It sort of begs the question of what else is new. I don't want to get my hopes up, but all we have to go off right now is this trailer, a logo, and a vague 2024 release date. And that is it. So there's a chance they might have more up their sleeve, and maybe this was just them getting us to acknowledge that at its core, this is still the same Thousand Year Door that you know and love. And then next year, they'll show off a couple extra things, maybe quality of life improvements, maybe new features, maybe nothing, I don't know. But I think it's a little too early to tell right now, so I won't get my hopes up. And they're doing a similar thing with Super Mario RPG. They're adding some new features to that, like they're letting you switch between the old soundtracks and the new soundtracks if you want, which is a really nice addition. I like that. Will we finally get to play through Luigi's Adventure? I know that's a big question floating around. I apologize for putting that idea in your head if it doesn't happen, but it would be very cool. So why is this important? Well, after the Thousand Year Door, we got Super Paper Mario. And Super Paper Mario was a really good game. I loved it. But it was also the first game to stray from the style of the first two games, and we never really went back to the old style. I think it showed us that Nintendo wasn't afraid to take something that worked and throw it all away for the sake of quote-unquote innovation. And that's really frustrating, because oftentimes it works in their favor, and we get games like Breath of the Wild, but sometimes you get games like Animal Crossing New Horizons, which was really disappointing for me, or pretty much any sports game on the Switch. Probably the worst example of this is the Paper Mario series. Sticker Star seemed like it would be a return to form after Super Paper Mario. That's how it seemed at first. But it took everything that people loved about the old style and turned it into something that people hated. The story was basically non-existent. The battle system was ruined. It had almost no character of its own. It was basically just a Mario game, but paper. And that sort of became the trend going forward. Paper Mario used to be something special, and whenever they announce a new one, these days, it just doesn't feel the same, because you know it's not going to be the same. All people wanted was a true return to form, and it felt like Nintendo either wasn't listening hard enough, or didn't care enough, or they just didn't understand why people loved the first two games so much, because the next two games felt like one step forward, two steps back. The fact that they're not just going back to their roots, but specifically remaking the Thousand Year Door, the fan favorite, and the fact that it looks so faithful to the original says to me that they are listening. I love this trailer because it feels like they went out of their way to show off everything that people love about this game. All the character designs, the battle system, all the music they showed in the trailer, all these good story moments, pretty much everything that makes the Thousand Year Door what it is. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think this could end up being a really good thing for Paper Mario going forward. They could have very well gotten lazy with it, like they did with Super Mario 3D All-Stars, but they've clearly put the time into remaking every asset, and even adding some new expressions for the characters. I do feel like at this point they recognize what people want out of Paper Mario, because they knew people would respond well to this, obviously. And if it does well, then it's possible we might get more games along the same lines going forward. Again, I'm not going to hold my breath for that, but we'll see. I certainly welcome waiting a little longer for the next game if it means Nintendo is taking a step back to reevaluate the series and why people love it so much. And that does sort of seem to be the trend with Mario recently. I really hope that Nintendo continues in this direction. If this is like the direction we're heading in, I can't even imagine like how good Paper Mario could be going forward, you know? But again, yeah, that's really just something we'll have to wait for when the time comes. But that's about all from me. Thank you very much for listening. I'm gonna figure out how to pass the time until this game comes out.